morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to the Conversations with Dr. Don show. The show is produced and broadcast in the Portland, Oregon area. And for your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And this evening, my guest this evening is Carol Freely, and we'll be talking about health care for the aging population.
And the last name is Trezona.
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 Trezona. Zona.
Carol Trezona. All right, that's
Correct.
good. That's fixed. All right. Now, I met you in a bird shop
Yes.
in Beaverton, Oregon, which is not far from downtown Portland. And we got talking about birds and bird seed and that sort of stuff. And you seem pretty interesting to talk about. So I wanted to go on talking to you for another couple of hours, but we had to buy our bird seed and get back and feed our birds.
Yes, we did.
And we're going to talk about health care for the aging population. It doesn't matter how old we are, but we know the aging population other than us are going on. So that's pretty important what's going on nowadays, particularly with politics in Washington. And it seems like the present administration is not concerned enough about the aging population. Yeah. So anyhow, as you know, the first half of the show is I'll be talking to you about who you are and what you're about and what you're being about, that sort of a thing, some history so that my viewers will have an idea where you're coming from.
Thank you.
When you talk about the birds and the aging population.
Yes.
I like your smile. I
Thank
still
you.
do.
Thank you.
So let's start right in. I'll ask you a few questions, and it goes unsaid that if I ask you a question that you don't care to answer, then don't answer it. Or tell me get lost or something.
Okay.
So if I were to ask your best friend, who is Carol Trezona? What would your best friend say? Carol is, and be your best friend.
Enthusiastic, caring, and willing to save anything, from a plant to a bird to a person.
You're a unique individual. Do you walk the talk?
Yes, I do walk the talk.
Okay, how so? Besides just buying bird seed and caring for your birds.
I do things like if I go to your home and I see that you have discarded a bouquet of flowers that has spent its time, that it's ready to go somewhere, I rescue it from the garbage and take it out and put it in the compost.
Really?
I think everything that ever was alive has a spirit, and it needs to do the full cycle and be returned to the earth.
Everything that is alive has a spirit. Are you spiritual?
I'm spiritual, yes,
What
absolutely.
does that mean for you, being spiritual?
Have to confess that I am not religious. I'm certainly not an atheist, but I'm an agnostic because I just simply have not yet had the time to figure out what's what.
Well, you got a few more years.
I do. I do.
So anyhow, when and where were you born?
I was a war baby actually, and I was born in Tacoma, Washington. And my father, interestingly enough, was in the service, and people say, oh, how patriotic. Well, he actually played the saxophone. And so I was born in Tacoma, and then we moved to Spokane for a period of time, and then we ended up in Wallowa County in eastern Oregon.
All over the place in Oregon.
Yes.
Have you traveled other places around the world?
Oh my, Dr. Don. I am so blessed. I am an old hippie. I actually lived 2 years in a Volkswagen bus whose name was Grindel in Europe. Did 56 countries, if you can imagine, in 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
And then I had the travel bug like crazy, so I travel whenever I can.
Still traveling?
Still traveling. I just returned from the Middle East just recently.
The Middle East, oh my God, you're taking a chance going over there, huh?
I think that where I was in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Bahrain, and yeah, it's safe.
We need 3 hours to cover your travels alone. Boy, I bet you've got good stories.
Yes, I have a story or two.
How about anything about your racial, national, or cultural heritage that's worth reporting to the viewers?
Actually not. Raised in a home where there was lots of talk, there was lots of conversation about politics, about day-to-day living. I think people with good understanding of human nature.
Do you understand human nature?
No, I've yet to figure that out. I'm waiting.
I'm enjoying you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
And you mentioned that you are an agnostic now.
I think I probably always have been, because I just simply, I can't imagine there's just one deity. There has to be. I was lucky enough to be in Israel for a month, and yes, which was lovely. And when you're there, you realize that Jesus was a scholar, he was a teacher, but it just raises more questions.
Mm-hmm. Do you have all the answers yet?
Never, and I probably never will.
Is that important to you, not having the answers?
No, because I think that you actually are just here for a period of time. You cross over, we'll see each other again. We won't necessarily know each other, but we'll like each other because we liked each other in this life. And I have aspirations in my next life. I'd like to be a pilot, a rock climber, and play the violin.
How did you acquire that sort of curiosity?
I have no idea.
And personality?
I have no idea.
You are wonderfully interesting, and which means you are available to an agnostic, and that says other things about you too. Did you ever have a religious preference growing up, for example?
I actually attended church with my mother's sister for a period of time, which was a very fundamentalist church, and I think that we just sort of fell away from that as we got older and more involved with church or with school activities. Church things were important, but the school activities, you accept a role as the class treasurer, and then you have responsibilities, and you belong to 4-H, and church just got to be a lesser thing.
Mm. Did your parents have a strong religious upbringing?
No.
Oh, so you're an agnostic for a long time.
Yes.
Wow, oh, wow. And how about your formal education? Would you say a few words about that?
Yes.
There's more than a few words you need, probably.
That always makes me chuckle, because my mother, who was very driven by education, and she said when I was about halfway through my junior year in high school, she said, and what are you going to be doing? And I said, about what? And she said, about your life. And I said, well, actually, I'm going to marry well and sell lingerie at Mar and Frank, which is now Macy's. And she said, as she looked at me, I ask you what you're going to do about your life. I'm going to college, Mom.
Uh-huh.
End it.
Yeah. How far in college did you go?
Went to Good Sam, which was associated with Portland State, and I have my registered nurse degree, and
yeah, so
lucky me.
Do you help people as a medical person and a nurse, RN?
Yes. Yes, it's been rewarding beyond belief.
I can imagine, only imagine. Yeah, I bet you got some stories about that too.
Mm.
Yeah, you've been retired now for a while.
No, I'm still working.
You're still working?
Yes, yes.
You didn't tell me when you were born, but you don't want to do that, do you?
Mm-mm.
So how much longer are you going to work?
Probably a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
My family doesn't do old. They do older because chronologically we have to, but we just don't do old.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let any grass grow under your feet.
Grass grow under you. Are you a tree hugger?
Yes. Good heavens, yes.
Good heavens.
There was actually a tree cut down at the complex where I live, my condominiums where I live, and I thought about climbing up in this tree and sitting in it, but I thought the neighbors would probably, yes, they would object.
So, do you have a partner?
No. No.
Boyfriend, girlfriend, husband?
Divorced.
Yeah, very well. Yeah. Any children?
No, but I actually worked for a pediatrician while I was I've done pediatrics and long-term health care, and so I have literally thousands of children.
Of course.
when I go to Fred Meyer, somebody runs up to me and says, "Oh, hi. Do you remember me?"
That's stalking for you?
Oh, it's wonderful.
I can tell. Yeah.
I love it.
And how would you characterize your political persuasion? You're left or right, center, or what?
I'm kind of center. I'm registered as an independent. I wish I could change things right now. I don't know that I can, but I can keep trying.
That's important, huh? Like, what things would you change?
Immigration. I think we need to certainly fix that. I would have to say, and my friends are probably now going, "Oh, she's going to say something." I'd like to see administration different than it is right now.
How so?
Let's see if we can change things in 2 years.
What kind of changes would you like to see in 2 years in terms of irrigation?
A leader who didn't tweet.
Well, that's the current thing nowadays. Aren't you tweeting?
No.
Do you have a cell phone?
Yes.
You're not a total Luddite, are you?
I would rather talk to you than tweet.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you are unique. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Do you ever do any demonstrations or those kinds of activities for ordinary citizens?
Yes, yes. In fact, being an old hippie, I was quite the demonstrator, and certainly against the war in Vietnam. And
what am I going to do with you, an old hippie? There's so many questions that your answers provoke me to. What was an old hippie like?
Hair longer than, below my waist, lots of tie-dye, and hanging out.
I guess it's safe to ask the question about drugs and marijuana. What do you think about marijuana being legalized as it is in
Well, Dr. Don, I don't have a problem with it being legalized. I have a problem with the fact that you can go to work high, you can drive high. I don't think that's not right.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm totally opposed to it, but I think that it has broader limitations than I would
What would you
like
do
to see.
about that?
I don't think that you should smoke and drive.
So how do you see if you've been smoking?
I know.
You have a way of testing, like the alcohol test?
It's like passing drug screens for jobs.
Okay. Yeah. The difference between sympathy and empathy, you see a difference between those two? What is the difference?
I think empathy is feeling along with someone, trying to identify with their feelings, and sympathy is more just feeling sorry.
Yeah.
I'd rather
How's
show
your capacity
empathy.
for empathy? Do you see with how I'm feeling right now? Can you tell that I'm nervous?
No, you're not nervous.
I cover pretty good, yeah.
Yes.
How about memberships in political, social, or civic organizations? Any kind of memberships like that worth repeating?
No.
Reporting, rather. Okay. Persons from the past or alive today that you look up to or admire. Any names come to mind
Oh,
for
my.
you?
My grandfather, who was absolutely my mother's father, was, to this day, I still talk to him and ask him what I should do about something.
Did you get answers?
Yes. Yes. He usually guides me the right way. He was an amazing man.
Is he alive now?
No. No.
You believe in reincarnation?
I don't believe in reincarnation. Using that term, I just believe that we cross over. You and I tonight sitting here are energy and ideas, and we don't just go away. When you cross over, you just simply cross over. I have talked to people about things in their life, experiences in their life, and I truly believe that these people were about to cross over and turned around and came back.
Cross over to where?
Their next life.
And there's no way of knowing ahead of time what that next life is going to be?
No. No. I think that we're probably bigger and better, and we improve ourselves as we go along, I would think. I'm kind of an old soul. I've never been ill. Ever.
What?
I've never taken a sick day.
That's impossible.
I've never had a headache.
Wow. We got to talk some more.
Lucky me.
Yeah, lucky you, and lucky people who know you and get to associate with you and get to experience you and your capacities for being the kind of human being I think we were born to be.
Thank you.
You have some qualities that reminds me of Buddhism and Buddhists, that sort of a thing. Have you heard that before?
Well, and I've thought about how interesting it would be to go to a retreat and do, you know, like to go to Bhutan or someplace and do.
You've been every place else.
Yes. Yes.
Any particular place comes to mind right now that had a unique fascination for you that you'd like to go back to?
You know, I don't think so much, Dr. Don, about going back to places other than there are things on my list that I want to do. The Middle East was certainly on my list. I actually, before I went to the Middle East, I was in New Zealand, which was fabulous.
Oh my gosh.
And I have a trip planned to Mexico City because I want to see the art there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm always making a plan of some kind.
How often do you make these trips in a year, typically?
3 or 4 times.
A year? Oh my gosh.
Lucky me.
Do you live in a van or a converted bus from the old hippie days or something?
I'd like to. In fact, I saw a Volkswagen bus on the way here that was painted in rainbow colors, and I thought, that takes me back to when I was living in a bus in Europe.
What were you smoking before you came here?
Nothing. I have to pass drug screens.
So people you like from the past or look up to was your grandfather.
Oh, yes, my grandfather. And my mother, most assuredly.
Why?
Oh, just my grandfather was a very interesting man. Born in the 1800s and went to college, came to Portland. He and his brother both came and went to college, which was fascinating. And Grandpa was the juvenile judge in Wallowa County, and he was in the state legislature, and he was an amazing man. Mm-hmm. Amazing. And he still, when I have a situation I don't know what to do, I say, hey, Grandpa, help me out here.
And he gives you some counsel?
He gives me a sign.
Anybody else? You mentioned your mother.
Oh, my mother, most definitely.
Why your mother particularly?
She was just so on target, and she knew what she wanted to do. She knew how to accomplish it. She had a marvelous career. She worked in the insurance business here in Portland and just was such a gracious lady.
Do your brothers and sisters think about her the same way?
Yes, I think so.
How many of them are there?
One each, one brother, one sister.
Mm-hmm. Where are they now?
My brother lives in Montana. My sister actually lives in Lake Oswego.
How often do you talk to them?
Not as often as I should. My brother's a very interesting character. He was shot down in Vietnam and very badly injured. He was a helicopter pilot. Mm-hmm. In fact, if you have nothing better to do, you can Google Trial by Fire Vietnam, and it's a book that's written about his crash. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And he's reasonably handicapped, but he has a very amazing business. He makes saddles, does Western.
Do you think you'd like to be a guest on my show?
I don't know that I could talk him into it. I barely can talk him into coming to Portland.
Any others come to mind for you that you admire or look up to?
Oh, I certainly had. There were some people when I was in nursing school, instructors that I will always respect and thankful for the skills that they taught me.
Mm-hmm. God, you were gifted with a bedside manner.
Thanks.
And when these people see you out in the world, and you've experienced them before in your capacity as a nurse and the kind of human being that you are, does that give you a special connection to them? And
yes.
Do you recognize it?
Yes, indeed.
Is there some sort of communication that goes on between you?
Probably the connection of being nurses and being professionals and problem solving, and I think that's the one constant in nursing, is that you're always problem solving.
Yeah. See? How about politicians or people who are leaders of countries or societies or cultures, other than blood relatives that we've been talking about so far? Anybody else?
Nothing comes to mind.
Gandhi or King?
Well, yes, most assuredly. Some of the great religious leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and exploring the great religions of the world. I think that's paramount. I have acquaintances, friends, that are atheists, and they don't allow their children to explore the religious aspects of life, and I think that's wrong. I think that we need to offer to our children to learn everything there is to learn, and then they can make up their own mind.
Okay. What do you think about the media nowadays? And it's such a broad idea. The media is television, broadcast, and print, and you don't tweet, so you missed that part.
I did.
So what do you think about what's going on in the media and its influence on our society and our culture?
Yes, yes. And I'm kind of a news junkie. I've got CNN on most of the time just because I really like to be up to date about what's happening. My friends give me a bad time because they say that it's very slanted, depending on what you watch. But I flip on the news at 10 o'clock and the cat and I sit there and have a conversation about what's happening in the world.
So you have a cat, including birds?
Yes.
How many cats?
One.
How old is he or she?
It's she, and she's probably 4 or 5, and her name's Cinco Cinco because I paid $55 for her.
Does she like you?
She's a character. Yes, she likes to sleep with her arm around, with her paw around my neck, and yes, she's my buddy.
You two connect?
Totally.
My neighbor in Beaverton, where I live now, they have 2 cats, and they're half bobcat and half something else. It's a crossbreed, and they're quite interesting. And I've had a couple of cats in my lifetime before, but I've never seen any cats like these. And I have stories about them. We can go on and on for about that. But my wife loves cats, and but I'm allergic to them, really. And I'm a dog person, and she doesn't care for dogs. So, can you help me with that, nurse? I need your counsel. I get a free consultation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you do anything else with television besides CNN, MSNBC, Free Speech TV, any of those?
Pretty much that's it. I'm not one to sit down and watch sitcoms or no. I'd much rather read a book or talk with a neighbor, go out and work in my garden.
Do you think CNN is fairly objective or neutral?
No, I don't think they're probably neutral.
How do you get other points of view on political and social issues and social justice, those kinds of things?
I think reading the newspaper, talking with people.
The Oregonian provides you with alternatives?
Probably The Week is the magazine right now that I'm in love with.
That. Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Uh-huh.
When Time made Donald Trump the Man of the Year, and I realize it's not for accomplishments necessarily, it's just for notoriety, I canceled my subscription.
Oh, we're gathering a flavor of what you're about. You're a closet leftist, I know. Tree hugger. What's most important nowadays in our world, in our life, in our country, to pay attention to do something about, besides administration in Washington?
To help each other. To help each other at every turn. Help your neighbor, help the person across the street, help somebody get their groceries in the car. If we all just hold hands and skip, we might get out of this alive. No, we won't, but at least we'll get out of it feeling better about what's happening.
How did you get this particular personality or mindset You're unique. And I meet all kinds of people through 18 years of doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think my grandpa, my friends.
Who listens to you more than others? All these people.
Probably the kids that work for Serenity Home Care.
Serenity Home Care. We're going to talk about Serenity Home Care.
Yes, that's my job.
So let's see. How about we take a break now? And then we'll come back and talk about health care for the aging population and why you think that's so important.
Great.
Connection of communication. Yes. So we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is still an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like Carol Trezona, my guest this evening. And we're talking about health care for the aging population. And now we'll talk more specifically about what that means. Okay, let's see. I got some prompting questions from you. And I've got a list of 4 of them, and I'm sure that'll be enough to get our conversation going because there's all sorts of things to talk about with health care for the aging population. Isn't health care for the aging population adequate nowadays?
That, I would have to say, sir, is a loaded question. For many, yes, it's adequate. But I think it also is very much connected to money. If you have resources, financial resources, anything is obtainable. If you don't have money, you might go without. I think it's there if you have the connections and you have the financial resources. Mm-hmm. But if you don't have the connections and you don't have the financial resources, quite possibly you go without.
So that's a problem.
It is.
So we don't have enough financial resources?
And I think our programs are stilted. I think that there are, and this doesn't have to do with geriatrics, this has to do with pediatrics. I was told the other day that the Oregon Health Plan does not cover dentistry.
Mm-hmm.
So what are these children to do?
Yes.
And yes, I mean, we are the richest country in the world, and we should be able to provide adequate care. You look at some of the European countries that provide child care, that provide, we're behind. We just don't have the right programs.
Why is that?
Politics, probably, for lack of better terminology.
Politics. Is there something going on in our country today that you would like to see different in terms of politics, particularly from the capital from Washington?
I'd like to have it different, but I think that, and I would have to say that if Mr. Trump is my president, I respect that. I stand behind that. I'd like to see things different, but we'll see, as I said, in 2 years.
Mm-hmm. You can't think, you won't think right now of how you would want to see things different with a different administration. You're talking about money for health care.
For health care.
There's not enough available.
No. And to be sure that the people that, immigration, homelessness, we just don't have the right answers right now. We need to strive to work for the right answers.
And you don't have any ideas right now about what the right answers are?
No, I don't. I wish I
Okay,
can
well,
solve medical problems, but I can't solve.
I'm probing you, being provocative here, because for me, we need to have a different approach to human behaviors toward each other, such that there is adequate or nearly adequate funds or resources, as some say, so that we can have a better situation for aging population.
Yes. Yes.
And right now we're very fortunate because of the economic class that it seems like we're both in. We're exceptions to the general rule, and there's a percentage, I'm on my soapbox now, of the population just in the rest of the world, and in America particularly, the richest country in the world, that we should have enough to care for our aging population. Do you have any more thoughts about that before we go to the other questions?
Well, and I think, Dr. Don, that there's a couple of things that I say repeatedly. The kids that work for long-term health care, it doesn't make any difference where they're working. The people that are providing the hands-on care, I have always said to these workers, you should be making what I make, and I should be making what you make, because you are the backbone of this business. You are the people that are out there doing the hands-on, in the trenches, caring for people. I sit here and put initials behind my name. And that should probably be switched. And I also have said to these children, these kids, these workers, that enjoy this strata now that you're seeing, that are in assisted livings and even just in retirement communities and memory cares. These people are the last probably generation that we will see that have finances to take care of themselves. The kids now, they can't put money in the bank. They can barely pay the rent.
Yeah.
And if we don't have money for these systems as they age, what will ever happen? They will never be able to hire people from my home care agency to take care of them because there isn't any money.
So the last time I'm going to ask you, what do we need to do so that there is money available for caring for the aging population as well as the rest of the citizenry? What do we need to do?
There's probably corporations with tax loopholes that need to be closed. There are probably, I think sometimes the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Sometimes.
And if we could switch that balance and be sure that everybody's paying their fair share.
So the system is such that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. What do we need to do about the system? Are you a communist?
No.
We're getting too serious there.
I was in Russia when communism was still in place, which was fascinating.
That was a different kind of a communism. No, this is
Yes.
pre-Joe Stalin or the Russian Revolution.
This was the 70s when, yes, things in grocery stores, I always remember that there weren't any labels other than just what it was. Everything was brown with a black label. No advertising.
You're a closet revolutionary.
Maybe so.
Yeah, so my point I'm getting at in a left-handed way, and it's getting boring for me even, is we need to change the system such that we have the end result such that there's a more reasonable distribution of wealth among ordinary citizens. And I think in some of the European democracies, there's not so wide a difference between those who are super rich and outlandishly rich, and I think it is because I'm a democratic socialist for all of my life, and so it seems that we can do something different. And I sometimes talk to my guests, occasionally the kind of guest is we're careful that we're talking about what's wrong, and lamenting about what's wrong. And I have to probe pretty hard for some of us to decide to not take this as the new norm, to say this is something wrong. We will talk about and do something about what is wrong. And it's wrong to have what's going on with immigrants at the border and what's going on with the present administration. But I need to keep going and looking at what kind of an administration do we need to have running our country. And I love my soapbox.
Taxes should be taxes. We all should be paying our fair share. And all of these corporations that are ducking under and not, if everyone was paying, as I said, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
Well, how about having a genuine alternative to the two wings of the same party in Washington right now, the Democratic and Republican parties? Bottom line, for generations now, they've been practicing the way they have, such that what's going on now that's causing our dilemma, particularly with the aging, and change that. So I don't know how we're going to do that. And Bernie was my hero for a while, but he's got a couple difficulties. But we want to get your views rather than mine anymore, because they've heard my views 1,000 times. So let's continue on, okay? Care for the elderly, needs, cost, availability, and we've touched on that somewhat. Anything more to say about that? That covers a whole bunch. Yeah. How can we protect the elderly from fraud and scams?
Yes, yes. And I think that the things that are out there, that the scams that take advantage of the elderly, people that just don't understand how it works, it's better now, sir, than it was. 3 or 4 years ago, I would have a resident come to me and say, I don't know what to do. I think that my son's son, my grandson, is in jail, and I just have had a couple of calls, and I just need to get this money. Yeah.
I had one of those today. And it's one that's familiar. The same setup, and I think the last time he did it was, it's been twice in the past. Maybe a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. And it's so, and I'm pretty smart, I think, compared to the average citizen. But anyhow, it's so inviting in the situation. I need some money because I need to hire a lawyer to get me out of jail. And if someone's really good, you got to really be alert. And I've learned to ask a few key questions, because I'm snookered into it, and I think once he gets a little more information from me, then he'll know where to go.
Yes.
Scams.
Yes. And hacking into things, and I mean, it's just incredible. The most amazing one, sir, that I heard of was a fellow who called, and he said, I've just made this terrible mistake. I have just deposited $5,000 into your checking account. So you hop on the computer and you look at your online banking, and sure enough, there's the $5,000. Well, then for him to get his money back, you just give him your checking account number and the routing number. Well, he just cleans out your checking account or anything else he can get his hands on. It's dreadful. And to take advantage of people that, the younger people are very in tune with things that can be scams, but the elderly, it's very difficult because people are taking
And you hear
advantage.
stories that are just tragic and sad. And programs like 60 Minutes and a few others like that expose these, but there's so many that are not really exposed. So we need to keep redoubling our efforts to do something about that and educate us old folk as much as we can. Probably have more of that kind of education for senior citizens.
Yes.
Yeah. protecting. Then next concerns regarding our government funding for Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Concerns about government funding for Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Say something about that.
Will it last? Will there be money there for the next generation?
And why won't it last?
Well, there are projections about when Social Security is going to be in jeopardy as far as the money that they pay out. There are projections about how long Medicare, that the government, it's not a bottomless pit.
Yeah, I'm kind of a conspiracy theorist, but I go along with the idea that I've heard a number of people say that the goal is to do away with Medicare and Medicaid such that it can be privatized, and the super rich can find another way to accumulate more money and power, so that the real competition in the world will be among those super duper rich people, because you and I are just fodder. And when America gets through utilizing and using the resources of other countries around the world, then they will turn toward us, because they never get enough. Right. Except you've got enough, I can tell.
I hope I have been wise.
Sounds like you have, yeah. And still, let me continue on. Who will be able to afford retirement communities that are being built at breakneck speed? Retirement communities, don't we need more retirement communities?
You have to have a certificate of need, and I think those are not all that difficult to come by. I just recently visited a new facility off of Barnes Road. It must easily have 300 plus.
That's important on Barnes Road.
Right, units. And they're building and building and building. And will there be people to fill up these units? Will people be able to afford them? If they can't have the money, it's very difficult, sir. If you are in a facility and you're a private pay, and you go along and you go along, and all of a sudden then you don't have any more money, your funds are depleted. You then have to go on Medicaid, and then Medicaid dictates where you go. There are only certain places that you can go, and you probably might end up with a roommate. This isn't at all what you and I expected. We want to continue to be as independent as we possibly can. If we run out of money, I think that we need to have some better planning about how we're going to take care of people that don't have funding.
It seems there was a time when I was a kid where people kept old folk at home and raised them and continued to love them and care for them until they passed away, and then have a wake at home. Yeah, my memories going back to a long time ago, because I'm 90 in December.
Mazel tov.
So what's happened to that idea, that behavior?
Our culture has never really been one that was a familial thing where you took care of mom and dad or grandma and grandpa. Other cultures, you stay with your family until you cross over. We have just never really had that kind of a population. It seems as though when you get so you can't take care of yourself, you go to a home.
Well, I think that there was much more of that when I was a kid back in the 20s and 30s than there is nowadays. I'm not talking about either all black or white, but I think if we could incorporate that more into our system, and we're talking about really ambitious ideas, then that would help from that end. And if we could do something about wealth distribution.
Yes.
But then that would require us to be a democratic socialist of some sort, some other. Right. But then we need to do something about the Constitution. We need a constitutional amendment that says corporations are not persons and money is not speech.
Yes.
That is so fundamental.
So fundamental. Yes.
Will that ever happen?
No, probably not. But you and I are.
How can, you see, just how can we band together for all of the above issues? And we just banded together just now with that
Indeed.
nowadays handshake. Give me a little hand, high five. Thank you for that. Oh, man.
Thank you.
Remember that sign?
Yes, but the one that you had around your neck in the bird store,
Right.
in the backyard bird store,
Yeah.
little advertisement for them because they're marvelous,
Yes, they are.
said, "Be kind to those who are not kind to you."
Mm-hmm.
And that got my attention straight away.
Because they need it most, huh? Yeah. All right. Band together. How do we band together? It seems we're banding together, and the existing system is functioning in a way that is finding ways to stop us from banding together,
Yes.
because then we're a threat to their existence.
Yes, I
There's a
agree.
constant battle, a constant fight. Yeah. But I think America needs to look more closely at what's going on in many of the Scandinavian countries, particularly in terms of how we're taking care of our fellow citizens and fellow human beings,
Yes.
too. I'm not sure what needs to be done, but we need to do something. And there's so many things going on right now, and there's only so much time that I have. And I find that I've lately cut back on my alternative publications because there's only so much time. And then now and then I've got to read a book that a guest has written that's important. And I need a 48-hour day. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's so many things that need to change. But, it's like plastic bags in the grocery store. Please, don't take plastic bags in the grocery store. Take your own.
I remember a time, and I'm telling my age, where you'd go to the corner grocery store. They didn't have supermarkets then. And you take your containers, and you'd get a pound of beans or rice or whatever, and you're not that old. But they were some good old
Right.
days.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, let's see. Say some more about health care for the aging population that we haven't talked about or covered. How can we have better health care for the aging population?
I just heard something recently. I'm on a panel at St. Vincent's.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're on
St. Vincent's is a what?
hospital,
Yes, of course.
and
For the viewers.
if you are on Medicare and you have a physical scheduled, and I am seeing you as your physician, and I'm saying, "How are you, Dr. Don?" And you said, "Oh, I'm doing okay, but I have this terrible cough." Terrible cough. I mean, it's just so bad. And so all of a sudden now, that visit changes. You're not there for a physical. You're now there for an illness.
Uh-huh.
So Medicare is only going to pay for A or B, not for A and B. I find this appalling. So then we cancel the physical part, and then we bill it out as an illness. What? I know. And
Well, you see, if we privatize it, then the managers will take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom line will be people like that we're talking about will be worse off than they are now. No, let me stop it. But I'm an optimist, and I like to see the result of speaking out and demonstrating, because revolutions are still occurring, and sometimes revolutions are slow in developing, and changes occur so gradually until we're not aware, until what we're seeing now as the norm is accepted as the norm, whereas even as little as 2 or 3 years ago, that was not the norm. Propaganda.
Right.
Joseph Goebbels, he was a good friend. No. So tell me some, 1 or 2 interesting stories about patients or people you've had a connection with in your work. Maybe you have 1 or 2 that will makes you smile as you talk about it. I see it starting on your face.
There's always the children who tell you the most marvelous stories. But
Yes.
I think working with the elderly, one of the most amazing stories I think I've ever heard, there was a woman I became friends with, and I would go and visit with her in the afternoons when I had a few minutes, and she had had a very massive stroke, and she was on a gurney outside of a room in emergency waiting to be seen. She crossed over, and when she crossed over, she was met by a group of women that had long skirts and different blouses, beautiful blouses. And they welcomed her and they asked her to please come and join them in their work, and so she did, and she felt so comfortable and so welcome. And finally she said, "Where are the men?" And one of the women said, "Oh, they're here. They're just in a different area working," which makes me think that when you cross over, we will like each other, but we won't know each other. So we'll have to reestablish relationships. And I thought that was fascinating. And there was this amazing story, and this is the second one that always sticks with me. This young woman's father died when she was about 14, and this was in the 1800s, and her mother, to survive, would either have to take in laundry or cook for someone, but she decided to remarry, and she remarried a man who was not very kind, and they went to a dance, and her stepfather perceived that she paid too much attention to this young man. So when they got back to the place that they lived, he took her out into the barn and beat her. And the mother, of course, couldn't do anything about it because she was intimidated by him. But the man that she had met at the dance apparently was concerned, and he came and found her in the barn, put her on the back of his horse, and took her to town. The next morning, he bought her a dress and piled up her hair on the top of her head and married her. And some years later, after I think they had an established relationship, she was pregnant, and with an ectopic pregnancy. There was no surgery. There was no possibility for her to survive. Back in those days. And she was septic, and she went down this long hall with the bright light at the end of this long hall where there was a door, and she opened the door, and her mother was standing there, and she said, "Turn around and go back. It's not time." And this lady was in her 80s when she's telling me this story.
And did she turn around and go back?
Hmm?
And how did you get this story?
She just shared it with me. We were just talking.
Yeah, and this other person before did the same thing.
Same thing, just chatting.
There's similar kinds of stories for those people who've passed on or
Right.
moved on.
Yeah, it's so fun because older people have such wonderful stories to tell. Wonderful stories to tell.
Mm-hmm. I think about, I've had a couple of near-death experiences, near-death experiences, I guess, and a similar sort of a thing. There's a bright light, and there's a sense of tranquility which stands out among everything else, and all the fear and anger and leaving what's been going on so far behind just disappears.
Dissipates. Yeah, it dissipates.
But then I can't remember how it happened when I decided to come back and not move on. But something happens. It's a transition, for want of a better word of putting it. And then I'm wondering how this thinking is occurring in me because of the drugs and the stuff they're doing to keep me alive, causing it or not. It's a wonderful mystery, but I like the idea of moving beyond the reality that I'm experiencing now.
And I think crossing over is not frightening. It's not terrifying, because as a nurse, I have sat at bedside with innumerable people as they've crossed over. They're tranquil. It's peaceful.
And you can sense when they're leaving.
No. And I think the first time anybody ever asked me, "Can you give me an idea about," no, because 9 times out of 10 I would be totally wrong.
Well, I'm aware of the time, and maybe you should say something to the viewers about what we talked about so far, and anything else that comes to mind. This is your time, a minute or two or whatever, and you can talk to the viewers about what you think you'd like to tell them.
thrilled to be on this show and to share my concerns about the elderly. I just hope that we can band together and make it a better world for the people on the other side of 50, 60, 70. We're headed towards...
I'm listening. I'm going to peg you.
My goal is 107.
Wow.
And I think I'll make it.
That's ambitious, yeah.
Why not?
And whoever you meet on the other side, I'm sure is going to appreciate your presence. And if I meet you on the other side,
we will.
I expect the same sort of sensing, for want of a better word, that we're experiencing now. And I'm looking at your eyes directly to see if I can see beyond that.
Well,
then I feel what's going on.
I'm sure I'll turn around and go, oh, hi. Let's have a cup of coffee.
Well, we're going to have a few public service announcements, but then we're going to need to say good night. So.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming aboard. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
To learn more about the Alliance for Democracy, that's a famous organization that I belong to, go to the national website at the Alliance for Democracy. It's a leftist organization. And the Portland, Oregon website at AFD at pdex.org. Oh, my favorite, the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be further down the tubes than they are. So go to the website to learn more. Oh, I got to tell you about learning how to end corporate personhood. Corporate personhood, that's an awful thing that says that corporations are persons and money is speech. So go to the website and learn how to move to amend the Constitution to take care of this problem in a wonderful, wonderful experiment in democracy. Remember, KFC, that's important. Not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind.
Right.
Be friendly and be charitable to you too.
Indeed.
And you too. And you too in the control room. Thanks again, and we will see you next time.